Take off your clothes. He says, it's a command. My love language was acts of service. Jeremy's love language was getting his dick sucked. We were a perfect match. I let him take me however he wants me.
This is the book that has 3 million ratings and an average of 4 stars on Goodreads, and it is even being adapted into a movie starring Anna Hathaway. So as someone who has read and read some more, here's my opinion! The book begins with our central protagonist Lowen as she watches a man walk right in front of a moving truck. But no worries, our classic abusive and problematic Colleen Hoover male arrives to save the day. Not to save the man who just got run over, but our protagonist, Lowen, who now had splatters of blood on her shirt. The man, Jeremy, guides her to the restroom, wherein he reveals he has seen worse than what just happened, like pulling his 80-year-old daughter out of a lake.
Julian!
But still, Lowen reaches the important meeting she was headed towards on time, and guess who she meets there again? Jeremy.
Coincidence? I think not!
I mean, it has to be a coincidence, or else there's a really crappy writer behind the screen writing all of this. Anywho, it turns out Jeremy's wife, Verity, a writer who's the author of an incomplete and very famous series written from a villain's point of view, and that little detail is important, by the way, is injured from a car accident and needs a co-writer to finish her series. And guess who's a writer? Our central protagonist. And guess who Jeremy's wife's favorite writer was? Lowen.
Coincidence? I think not!
I mean, it has to be a coincidence, or else there's a really crappy writer behind the screen writing. Also, by the way, Jeremy didn't just lose one child. He also lost another daughter 6 months before he had pulled his daughter out of a lake. Immediately after this revelation, this is how the 3rd chapter starts. I had a boyfriend in my early 20s named Amos who liked being choked. It's why we broke up, because I refused to choke him.
Oh my god.
I don't think you have any idea how fast I really am. I'm fast as fuck, boy.
Also, guess who gets evicted out of their apartment after Jeremy offers to let Lowen stay in the house so she can collect Verity's notes for the series? Lowen.
Coincidence? I think not!
I mean, there has to be a coincidence, or else there's a really crappy writer. My eyes are pulled to the headboard, specifically to the teeth marks bitten onto the top edge of the headboard in the center of the bed. I'm wondering which one of them had to bite the headboard in order to keep quiet during sex. The teeth mark belongs to Verity, Lowen realizes when she finds an autobiography written by Verity about her life detailing overtly intimate details about her sex life with Jeremy. The autobiography recounts how Verity met Jeremy and fell in love with him, but it takes a turn for the worst when she remembers conceiving the twins that are now dead. She's jealous of how much Jeremy loves the twins that are in her womb, and even tries to have a miscarriage so that Jeremy would love her and not the twins. In the end, she admits to drowning Harper in the lake. Harper, I said her name quietly, afraid if I called too loudly she'd get a second wind and pop up out of the water. I took my time. I didn't want to go too far and risk touching her, bumping into her. What if there was still life in her and she clung to my shirt? Tried to pull me under. I was aware I needed to be out here when Jeremy showed up. I needed to be crying, cold, on the verge of hypothermia. Bonus points if I was taken away in an ambulance. By the end of the book, after Jeremy kills Verity, it is revealed in a letter written by Verity that the autobiography was not an autobiography, but instead a writing exercise, and that Verity hadn't actually killed her daughter. I thought maybe if I released my guilt and my grief onto this fictional character, onto this fictional villain I had created, it would somehow help me in a twisted way. I wrote all about Chasten's death. I wrote all about Harper's. I even went back to the beginning of the manuscript and added foreshadowing so the entire thing would match a grim new reality. But in a way, it did help ease a small fraction of my guilt and pain, being able to blame this fictional version of myself rather than accept the blame in real life. Through this, Colleen Hoover explores a villain point of view and further on an unreliable narrators, but it is so redundantly done. This book becomes infinitely unimpressive when you read Lolita, a book that is also an attempt at a villain's perspective, specifically a pedophile. And this video is about to get much darker, so you have been warned. In the book, Humbert has a perverse affinity towards little girls that he finds attractive, and he even has a name for them, nymphets. You have to be an artist and a madman, a creature of infinite melancholy, with a bubble of hot poison in your loins, and a super voluptuous flame permanently aglow in your subtle spine, or how you have to cringe and hide, in order to discern at once by ineffable signs, the slightly feline outline of a cheekbone, the slenderness of a downy limb, and other indices which despair and shame and tears of tenderness forbid me to tabulate. The little deadly demon amongst the wholesome children, she stands unrecognized by them and unconscious herself of her fantastic power. Notice how the narrator shifts the blame from himself by the proposition that it in itself is the fault of the little girl for being attractive to her predator. She is a deadly demon against whom the ordinary man is rendered defenseless. The prose is intellectually invigorating, flattering the reader by addressing them as learned and astute, which garners the audience respect and veneration, so that his sexual advances towards Lolita are seen as romantic and her reluctance to comply sideswept and forgotten. To add on to this, we're given a reason as to Humbert's pedophilic tendency. When he was a child, a girl he loved dearly died of typhus, and from then on his romantic venerations were reserved to girls aged 9 to 14. In yet another literary piece, we see a worthy attempt at a villain's point of view in John Milton's Paradise Lost. Just as Nabokov portrays Humbert in a compassionate light, inspiring empathy in the heart of the reader, Milton portrays Satan, the ultimate villain, as a hero, beginning the book with Satan and his followers vanquished in hell under the wrath of God. Is this the region, this the soil, the clime, said then the lost archangel, this the seed that we must change for heaven, this mournful gloom for that celestial light? Notice how there is a degree of compassion bestowed upon Satan to have lost heaven in exchange for hell against a foe whom thunder hath made greater. God is greater than Satan by virtue of luck, by virtue of chance, by virtue of the odds, and Satan is the underdog, the unlikely hero, the victim. Satan is the poor kid who gets bullied in high school while the rich kid enjoys splendor and riches. Satan is a revolutionary leader leading a revolution against the upper class in the French Revolution, proclaiming off with their heads to the cleaving of the guillotine. And why portray Satan in such a graceful light? Because that is how Satan appears to the ordinary man, not as a red-faced two-horned devil, but instead as an ordinary individual with a human face. As a man standing on a platform with a toothbrush mustache spitting saliva with the vigor of his speech in the 19th century Germany, promising a world devoid of Jews. As a man smiling into a mugshot about whom one couldn't possibly jump to the conclusion that he abducted and raped dozens of women or men. And more importantly, as an intellectually sound individual with a good sense of humor who in hiding harbors a perverse affinity towards little girls. Coming back full circle to Verity by Colleen Hoover, we can see a blatant flaw in Colleen Hoover's approach towards the unreliable narrator in writing Verity. It's as if she drew a sketch of how she thinks a really horrible person would think and went with it. There is no complexity to Verity's villainy, no context, no reason. Verity is just evil for the sake of being evil, for the sake of shock value. She is just someone who thinks really horrible thoughts about her children and is obsessed with her husband. There's only a half-hearted attempt at a backstory, and that's it. Most of the time, the devil appears not as a devil but instead dressed in human clothing. This is the reason why Milton portrays Satan in a sympathetic light, because in real life, Satan invokes sympathy within us. This is why Vladimir Nabokov writes from the perspective of such an evil man, to make the reader realize that such individuals are amongst us as brothers, fathers, friends, and comrades. In Paradise Lost, Satan becomes terrifying, not because he has red eyes, pointy ears, and two horns on his head, but because he resembles an ordinary human being. In Lolita, Humbert becomes terrifying for the fact that he is indistinguishable from the ordinary individual, and in Verity, by Colleen Hoover, Verity as a character is less frightening for the fact of her comically exaggerated and fantastical evil traits.
So what if he's the devil, Rick? At least the devil has a job. At least he's active in the community.